Hello and welcome to the AA Ireland podcast. I'm Paddy Comyn and we're joined by Blake Boland. How are you, Blake?
I'm very good.
Settling in at this stage?
Past the first month and you've kept me around. Good sign.
Yes, I think we'll be keeping you around anyway. What did you do this week? You were off doing Citroen?
That's right, yeah, the C5X launch, which was fantastic, great venue, and they put us up down there. We got to see the EC4X as well. It was just brought into the country and is already on a boat today, I'm told, back to the UK. Okay. But yeah, lovely car. I was able to take it home, so we have it for the week. And as you know, we're recording a video later on looking at it as a FEV, plug-in hybrid, and trying to test can we get that journey back home on pure electric. But yeah, looking forward to doing a full review on it, and that'll be up on the channel.
Yeah, we both live about 50 kilometres away from the office, so we are attempting to drive all the way home without using any petrol power alone. So it's really a test to see if there is any point to PHEVs, because there's lots of people who think there's no point, you're just dragging around a big heavy battery. So we will put it to the test later on. But the point of today is to talk about a story that we did a couple of weeks ago. I think one of the first stories that you did in your AA career, which was looking at EV charging costs and specifically domestic charges, because people who buy electric cars, then they take them home and they might go as far as getting a wall box. Pretty much after that, they don't really think in a lot of cases how much it is costing them to charge. We know that EVs cost a little bit less to charge, but how much less? And are there variances within the charges domestically? So if you and I lived on the same street, we both had a Volkswagen ID4 and we both had the same charger, does that necessarily mean that we're paying the same for electricity? So Blake has been doing all of the research, and it's something that was picked up quite a lot across media. But here, just for you guys, is a slightly deeper dive, because only this week alone, Blake, we released our petrol and diesel prices, and diesel is now up 4% versus last month alone.
Yeah, the second highest on record, I understand.
Yeah, we've been doing the AA prices since 1991. And since then, now we have an average diesel price of €2.02. And we know that there's lots of places selling it for more than that. But we are approaching, unfortunately, the highest price for diesel at the moment. Anyway, more upon that later. Stick around for the details on that.
Are you thinking of renewing or shopping around for car insurance to get the best deal? Well, the AA is one of Ireland's top car insurance intermediaries, and we have been providing car insurance for nearly 40 years. The AA is teamed up with the top insurers to compare quotes, so you get the best level of cover to suit your needs at the right price. We also do price checks, so you don't have to. To find out more, go to the AA.ie.
So Blake, that story about you potentially spending 3.5 times more than your neighbour for charging the same car. Give us the headlines from that first of all before we look into it further.
Yeah, so that's the headlines. 3.5 times more than your next door neighbour who's got the same car and charges up, the same amount. And the reason is that not everybody's shopping around to get the proper tariff that suits them and works for them best. So the research you could take it a long way and extrapolate a lot out, but that 3.5 times figure. So if you, for example, had a pay-as-you-go meter and were on Electric Ireland, we figured out what that rate would be and then calculated out a second and a third rate. And then Electric Ireland has a whole variant, so you can get free charging on the weekend, or some of them have nighttime boosts. And if you take those variants within Electric Ireland alone, it's 3.5 times the amount. But in reality, if we got down into the weeds now, you could theoretically charge your car almost for free, or you could even pay a massive amount, twice of what we used in that example. So there's a huge variance, and as we go on today, we'll talk a little bit about that in more detail. And yeah, people just to figure out the best way for them to charge, to stop and have a think about it.
So for people who don't know, okay, they've maybe just taken delivery of their electric car, they've got their wall box, and they've done nothing else. So, if you're an Electric Ireland customer since the 1st of October, you're paying, 42 cents per kilowatt hour at the worst time?
Yeah, at the pay-as-you-go rates is up around there. They're changing so frequently, and all the different suppliers have different rates, and there's different incentives to charge at night. Some of them have announced that they will put up the rates, but they're not yet. So it's impossible for us to sit here and tell somebody exactly what they're going to pay for it.
So look, let's start from the start, because we don't want to assume anything. Yeah. So first of all, what is an electric vehicle? Let's start with the absolute basics. If someone is saying, I've heard about EVs, I know you don't put petrol or diesel into them, but what are the absolute basics here?
Yeah, so you've got a big battery in them, and that provides the energy that drives the electric motor. So before you would have had a petrol or a diesel engine, now you've got a motor. Beforehand it might have been a 100 horsepower diesel engine. Now you might have something like an 80 kilowatt motor.
So do you put any fuel at all into an electric vehicle, a full electric vehicle?
Well, not the liquid form anyway, but yes, we would put in, your fuel would be the electricity that is just floating around your house, that's coming through the grid.
But there are people who think that if they have a hybrid car, that they're driving an electric car, in inverted commas.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a grey area in there. So that the hybrid car, they go all the way from something called a mild hybrid, which really isn't capable of actually moving the car forward. Then there's hybrids that have tiny little motors with tiny little batteries, and they might keep you going at cycling pace for a couple of kilometres. Mm-hmm. Then you've got your plug-in hybrid electric vehicles.
Like the car we have this week. Yeah.
That's right, yeah, the Citroen. And that's a PHEV, so PHEV. And those ones have bigger batteries and stronger motors. So, for example, the car that we have now, the Citroen C5X, that's got an 81 kilowatt motor. And my old Nissan Leaf also has an 80 kilowatt motor, although that's fully electric.
Well, and like kilowatts in people are already thinking, oh, Jesus, what are they talking about with kilowatts and whatever else? A kilowatt is what?
A kilowatt essentially is a measurement of power. So when we're talking about cars, which is what we're doing here today, electric vehicles, kilowatts, we're looking at the power that motor can output, translate horsepower as we used to, or how fast you can put the power back in. That's how fast you're charging.
So in simple terms, the bigger the horsepower, that means what?
The more kilowatts, yeah.
So a battery that has a bigger kilowatt hour size, because it's kilowatt hours, not kilowatts in terms of battery.
Yeah. This is one that we see confused very, very frequently, and even in
a major manufacturer's site.
Yes, as we noticed earlier on today, they sound almost identical. So it's a kilowatt is a measurement of power, but a kilowatt hour is a measurement of energy. So we used to have horsepower, and now we've got kilowatts. Or we used to have a 50-litre tank, and now you might have a 50 kilowatt hour battery.
But so in simple terms, the bigger the number of kilowatts on a car, the more powerful it'll be, and the bigger the kilowatt hours, the further it will go. Is that fair to say?
That's very fair, yeah. Of course, different cars, a bigger SUV is going to go a little bit less because it's heavier and less, the more wind resistance. But yeah, absolutely. And
again, without assuming anything, and apologies to anyone who is already going, I know all this, but there's plenty of people who don't.
Yeah.
Talk to me about range briefly. So previously, when we'd started at the electric car journey, range was a real worry, because you were talking about 80, 100, 150 kilometres from a full charge.
Pretty bad, yeah.
Where are we now?
Once again, there's a real variance. So, if you look at some of the cars on the market with lower ranges, and I hate to point fingers, but the Honda E, for example, or the Mazda MX-30, they have smaller batteries in and around 30 kilowatt hours. And with those, you're kind of optimistically going past 200, but in reality, you're in that 170, 180 kilometre mark. Then we've got a lot of cars, like, let's say, what's the most popular EV in Ireland at the moment? Paddy, we were looking into
Volkswagen ID4.
Yeah, lots of them on the road. And the bigger battery variant of those has 77 kilowatt hours. So now we're talking about 2.5 times the amount of the other ones. And with these cars, you're looking at, a solid 350 to 400 kilometres, and you'll push past that.
I don't want to put you on the spot, and if you don't have the answer at the top of your head, it's fine. Is there a rough guide to kilowatts per kilometres? If you're looking at a car that has 50 kilowatt battery, or you're looking at a car that has 100 kilowatt battery, is there a kind of a rough guide as to how far they will go based on that size?
Yeah, we have something called the WLTP test cycle, and it stands for something along the lines of the Worldwide Light Vehicle Testing Procedure. Don't quote me on that, but it's close. Is it? Yeah. Okay. So they put the car through tests, but also sometimes the manufacturers just nominate, they'll put the car through the tests themselves, and they're really just indications, and they're always quite optimistic. They're not impossible. You can beat them if you're careful in summertime, but in general, they're optimistic. So me, in my head, I like to shave, 10, 15, 20% or something like that.
I usually take the VAT off. That's how I figure it out.
That's a great way of putting it, Paddy. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the range plus the VAT is the WLTP.
Yeah.
So, but I guess a car that has a 50 kilowatt hour battery is going to do around north of 200 kilometers.
Yeah,
real world.
I think you're looking at a solid 250, 270. You know, you put that into a car that is the size of a Range Rover, and you're getting a lot less than a Fiat 500 or something like that. But yes.
And just to summarise again, of course, before we move on, what are the things that affect range?
The biggest is arguably the speed that you're going at. And Paddy, you've done a test on this yourself, so you might come in on this in a moment. But for example, if you can just drop your speed from 120 kilometers per hour on the motorway right down to, let's say, 100 or something like that, the difference, even though you've only dropped, let's say, top figure here, you know, you've dropped a fifth of the speed, you're going to save a lot more of that in energy. Then after that, you know, making sure your tyres are inflated properly. The weight of the car is obviously a factor as well. Temperature, yeah. So in winter, you know, the air might be a little bit more dense. There might be moisture in the air, etc. And the car will just go that little bit less. You know, if you've got the heating on or the aircon, obviously that runs through the battery. But then so many of them these days have heat pumps, which are incredibly efficient.
What is a heat pump?
A heat pump is... Okay, let's just give a very, very rude description of it. I'm not saying it's a fridge in reverse.
Okay.
So, you know when you put your hand on the back of the fridge, it's really, really warm.
Yeah.
And that has taken the heat out of your nice cold beer inside the fridge, and it expresses it out the back. So what we do with a heat pump is we just simply reverse that. So we're taking the heat from the air around the car and we're bringing that into the cabin to make it a bit warmer. But the thing is, they're about 400% efficient.
Oh.
So for every kilowatt hour of energy you use to bring that heat in, you're getting 4 kilowatt hours of heat in the car.
Wow.
Now, you get down to the technicalities there, and the physicists will argue with you, but that's roughly
But
it.
look, you know, to help people listening, and you know, if they're in the showroom and the sales guy is like, you know, you should really get this heat pump, but it's €800, is it worth it?
You'd have to look at the kind of driving you do. For me personally, if I'm going to spend, let's say, 50,000 on a car, and I can get it with a heat pump for 50,800, I'm going for it. It's just, it'll just give you that extra bit of range. But also, over the lifetime of that car, if you're doing 100, 150, 200,000 kilometres, if you've just shaved off 1, 2, 3% efficiency, that adds up into a lot of money saved because you wouldn't have spent it on charging.
I guess what I'm getting at is it's not a gimmick, it's actually quite a useful piece of kit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And some of the like bigger, fancier cars that we're seeing now, the more expensive ones that we test drive, they're coming with heat pumps, and you can just
standard.
See it.
Yeah, standard.
Yeah.
So going back to the costs, so we know that you've bought your electric vehicle, you know that you've started to understand that with this, if I charge it fully to 100%, that it might go 200, 250 kilometers or so. How much is that going to cost you if you don't do anything? So let's use the example of the Volkswagen ID4, the most popular EV at the moment. If you charge that from totally empty to totally full at home on the sort of average, in inverted commas, ESB, Electric Ireland, whatever you're having yourself rate, how much roughly will that cost?
Yeah, well, to go back to what we were talking about earlier on, and that was the piece that we did. So if you've got your 77 kilowatt hour usable battery in the ID4 and you're paying something like, you know, Electric Ireland's pay-as-you-go tariff that we refer to, and that's 43 cents, give or take, per kilowatt hour, then you're looking at just over €30 to charge it. But if you're careful and you get that night rate boost meter, and that price that you were paying drops down to about 12 cents, you know, so roughly a third of that, and then you're paying less than €10. You know,
so €10, say, in an ID4 for 400 kilometres?
Yeah, I think in my kind of driving, I'd probably beat that. I'd be 450, 460, but I think people could reasonably assume something like that, yeah.
But then at the other end, €33 for 400 kilometres.
Yeah, but that's taking a fairly pessimistic view, you know, in terms of how much you're paying. That's a pretty high rate.
But I guess the point I'm making is, even if you did nothing and you're paying the most expensive rate of electricity at home, domestically, mind you, we'll get to the external chargers later, you are still going to be about 50% less than an internal combustion engine car. So say that we know now from our current petrol prices, it's about €2 per litre for a diesel, a little bit more in some cases. You have a 50 litre fuel tank. To fill that is going to cost you €100, and that might get you 800 kilometres or so. Yeah. So you're about twice the cost of an EV, even at its worst domestically, correct?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit better than that. But, we've had done a little bit of work on it, and we've figured out that crossover price for what it is at the moment.
Yeah, so I mean, we don't want us to we don't want to see these prices for electricity at any stage, but we said what, 74 cents per kilowatt. If electricity got to 73 or 74 cents per kilowatt hour, you would be around the same cost as petrol or diesel.
Yeah, presuming a like for like comparison. So you take the fully electric Nero against the fully fossil fuel version. Yeah, you're in and around that fee. The early 70s, it's always going to change a little bit whether you're paying 195 or 205, but yeah.
Now, we're nowhere near that yet, and we would imagine if we did get to that stage, that what state would petrol and diesel be also at that stage? Yeah. So how should people go about, presuming they've already covered buying their car and buying their wall box, where do you start in figuring out what's the best time to charge and who to go with as a provider?
Yeah, well, let's start off. Do you want to go for the most expensive, or will we start off with the cheapest,
Well, I guess, let's start at the most expensive, and that's if you don't do anything, right?
Yeah, so most providers, for home electricity at the moment are hovering around that 40, 45, or you might get a deal on something better, and then there's one or two that are even higher than that. But if you're on the public network and you're charging, Ionity, for example, if you don't have membership at one of their programs, then you can be paying, not too far off €1. I mean, it's in and around that 70, 75 cent. And at that stage, you're almost matching your petrol and diesel equivalent. So that's hugely expensive. After that, then you're dropping down to EasyGo, to ESB networks, and they're in and around that kind of 45 cent if you're on a DC charger. So you're not quite half the cost, but you're not too far off. It's still significantly cheaper. And we're still talking about a pretty pessimistic rate. Yeah. Then you can charge on the slower AC ones, and they're the posts that you see in supermarkets or by the side of the road. They're not huge, big units, just little lampposts even sometimes. And they're a little bit cheaper again, maybe about half the price of what Ionity was or thereabouts. Then after that, we're moving into domestic rates, and that's where it gets really interesting, but also really tricky.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talk us through those. If what would your advice be for someone who wants to make the most of charging at home, and also who wants the cheapest rate line, who doesn't want that?
Well, okay, let me give you a situation that happened not in Ireland but in the UK a few months ago. Now, we can't have it here because we don't have the sophisticated meters that they do. But there's this company called Octopus Energy over in the UK, and this is actually hard to believe now, but what they did with one of their particular rates was they tracked the EV wholesale price. Now, at certain times during the night or on the weekend, it was really windy or there was a lot of sun at the same time. There was so much renewable energy coming onto the grid that operators would have to be paid essentially to load shed or to shut down plants and stuff like that, where they would have to pay the producers anyway. So it was cheaper to pay people to use electricity than pay the producers. So there was a case where, if you had a charger at home, you could have put, 200 or 300 kilometers into your car just because you happen to have three-phase or something like that, and been paid a few pounds sterling to get that. Not pay them, they would have paid you, which is just incredible. So that's the dream situation, but that hasn't happened in Ireland. But what is happening for some people, Paddy, is that they've got solar panels on the roof of their house, and they're producing electricity for free, during the day. And what some people have is Zappy Charger is one example. So this has a little bit of technology that it knows how much your solar panels are producing. It knows how much your house is demanding. So the fridge, maybe you've got a washing machine on or something like that. And it will send the surplus into your car. So you're just getting free electricity into your car. Now, we're not talking about great volumes, but as we know, the average car is parked up somewhere for, 22 hours a day, thereabouts?
Yeah, of course, something like that, yeah.
So a lot of people are charging for free. And there's also a couple of electricity rates out there where you can nominate a day on the weekend where you can actually get free electricity, which is a great one.
And, how do you find this? Is this just a case of trawling through various websites or talking to your provider and letting them know you have an EV, for example?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of websites out there that do comparisons of tariffs, and you can input a certain amount of data. But if you are thinking about getting an EV or you already have one, then you can look for EV-specific tariffs. But it's also worth bearing in mind that these kind of tariffs really only operate with smart meters, and you might not have one of those at home.
Is there a real benefit to getting a smart meter?
So it's a double-edged sword in some senses. So if you can take advantage of a rate, and let's say you do a lot of miles, and you're going to charge your car overnight, and you're going to use a lot of kilowatt hours, a lot of energy, then it can be worth it because you'll get such a cheap rate at night, but you'll probably pay a little bit more during the day. So if you're running your washing machine and your dishwasher and your electric shower during the day, that might be wiping out some of the benefits at night. And this is why people have to be smart about it. And it comes back to doing your research, talking to other EV drivers and considering when you use that energy.
Is there a tendency for people, especially when they start with EVs and they buy their EVs, to constantly feel the need to charge it fully?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I had that. You know, as you know, Paddy, I've had an electric car for about 5 years now. And I remember the first month, you know, being a little bit nervous the odd time or go, it's down to 20%, I better charge in, you know, panic. And at this stage, I've seen it dropping down to 1% before plugging in.
Because that can really make the difference. I think, you know, people are coming home in the evening, especially as we know the grid is under pressure between sort of 5 and 7 p.m. There's still people who are coming home and just plugging in their car at 5 p.m. in the evening and leaving it there till the next morning. And A, are paying the highest rate of electricity, and B, are putting everyone else under a little bit of pressure in terms of the grid, right?
Yeah, that's right. And what we're starting to see now with the rollout of smart meters is incentives for people to switch away from those times. We're not as sophisticated as other countries yet, but we're getting there. So what we want to do is to incentivize people to not charge your car, to not have an electric shower, to not put your dishwasher on between 5 and 7, as you mentioned. So now can we program these machines and your car to do it during the night?
Because it always doesn't have to be the smart meter. Would you get away with a situation where you ask your car to decide when to charge, so you can set it to charge between 2 and 4? If you had that rate, could you get away with having that without having the smart meter if you knew that your electricity was, you know, at a lower rate between 2 and 4 a.m.?
Yeah, because you need the meter to differentiate between when you're using it. So if it's a dumb meter, to use the opposite of a smart meter, then it doesn't know whether it's 6 p.m. or 3 a.m. It doesn't know that, so it can't separate out your rates.
Are we getting to a stage, or will we get to a stage, where electricity providers charge differently for electricity that's going into a vehicle?
That's a tricky one. How do they find out? So if you've got a smart charger, theoretically, yes, they'll know that electricity in your house went to these two different sources. One was just for your lights and your dishwasher, and this one went to the car. We're not there yet. In theory, it could happen, but are we going to see that? I think that's looking down the line a little bit, and
we don't want to give them any ideas.
Possibly a little bit pessimistic, but yeah.
If we are looking at a situation where people are saying to us, right, EVs are too expensive, and we know that EVs are not cheap, and we know they're not for everyone yet because of the costs, and it's just prohibitive for some people. How far do you think it takes before you start reaping the savings benefit financially of maybe that extra 7, 8, 12 grand that you spent on buying the EV versus the regular petrol or regular diesel version?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no straight answer to that because everybody is driving a different amount, and the cost that you're paying for the car is going to be different. And we're seeing that EVs are being quite expensive at the moment. We're looking forward to price parity. We're not there yet, but it's a little bit more complicated than that as well. And I know that we had the Nero EV on test there a couple of weeks ago, and myself and yourself, Paddy, we were going through the configurator. We said, oh, look at that, this is a good 10 or 12 grand difference between this car, and that's happened on other models before. But then you look into the details and you go, okay, well, if we're going to compare the EV to the cheapest petrol version, you can only get the highest spec level if you opt for EV. So they won't allow you to... You don't
see very many poorly spec'd EVs.
Yeah, because when you see an EV, when you're thinking about buying one, it is... I wouldn't say always, because there's a couple of exceptions, but very, very frequently it's the top spec one. It's coming with the bigger wheels, it's got the leather seats, it's got all the technology.
Well, it's always automatic for a start, which is another 2 grand sometimes in a regular ICE car.
Absolutely. And then you look at things like, you know, the power comparison. So that the EV version, if you want to compare that to the entry level petrol version, and it's just night and day in terms
acceleration, exactly. You know, a much smoother drive as well. So you're not having to work. It's not having to work so hard because it's so much torque and it's instant.
It's there, yeah. You know, they say that it's 100% of the power available 100% of the time. Yeah.
But another concern people will have, obviously connected to the purchase price of buying the car, and maybe then the running costs of it later on, is how these cars age. So if you have bought a new EV, people think, oh, well, what happens to it when it's 7, 8, 9 years old? Is it, running, will it do 10 kilometres and then stop? What is the perceived wisdom at the moment on how these things are aging?
The technology is moving so quickly that what we knew even 5 years ago is quite different from what we know today. And you can take the Nissan Leaf that I have. That's had battery degradation. Every battery will have some level of degradation, but it's a lot more in my car than it would be in anything that you buy today that's new. And we're seeing even some of the older Nissan Leafs that were used as taxis in places like Scotland racking up 300,000 kilometres. Now some of them would have gone through battery replacements. But if you look at the modern technology, it's incredible how far they're going. I mean, standard guarantees from manufacturers these days are, 5, 6, 7, 8 years or 150,000 kilometres. And people also have this notion that you drive your car for your EV for, let's say, 150,000 kilometres, and all of a sudden you wake up in the morning and it's dead. And that's not the way it goes. It's a slide. It's a gradual decline.
I think it's also important to explain how a battery is configured. It's not one big lump. It's made up of a variety of cells. If you cut open, and I've seen various cars cut in half in my time, and the likes of, say, Volkswagen ID3s, ID4s, you see that they're made of a series of cells which are slotted in. So it's not one big lump that if there's an issue with that one lump, your car is snookered.
Absolutely. There's hundreds of individual cells in some of these. And there's also different formats. I mean, there's pouch cells and there's cylindrical ones. And Tesla had a big announcement there last year with what people are facetiously calling the baked beans tin. They're just bigger, larger individual cells. So there's a huge variation there. And then it's the way you stack the batteries within the car as well. So you can put them in series where they're linked up and you get real high voltage. You can put them side by side. There's whole variations the way. It's just not one big lump of metal. Absolutely.
It would be wrong for us not to mention some of the EVs which were voted on at the AA Ireland Car Awards, which took place recently.
A great night out.
Yes, it was a good day out. A great night out. Where some of Ireland's best journalists, car journalists, voted on a variety of awards, over a winner being Dacia Jogger, but there were some EV specific awards, and the entry point award, or the best small EV, was the Fiat 500e. What a car.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I had it for a few days. I was supposed to actually have it for a week, and I think there was an incident with one of the other cars that was meant to be shown at the ploughing championships, but we got it, and I had it for a few days, and I just loved it. I mean, it was so much fun, plenty of power there. The range was pretty good.
And I believe Ireland's cheapest EV, it's about 25,000 euros starting off with the entry point with a smaller battery.
Yeah. So incredible value. I mean, not everybody drives to Cork and back every day of the week, So if you do the national average, where you might have 30, 40k in the week, or you're dropping the kids in school.
Out of town.
That's plenty.
And we had a category best value EV, and that was, it was definitely going to be an MG, because those two were almost neck and neck. So MG5 came out on top, and again, what a car. And we've just today seen news of a new version.
Yeah, the refresh was just announced only 2 hours before we recorded this. The MG5, I was surprised with the MG5, not because of the quality of the MG5, but because I presumed that the MG ZS EV was going to get the nod, because that was the refreshed version. Whereas our jury panel voted the outgoing MG5 model the best. It was a bit of a surprise, but happy for them, because the level of spec that you get in that car for the money is just incredible.
But it's such a practical car as well, and bar Audi's coming online, it's the only EV estate.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, you could argue the Porsche is, but I think that's it's a bit of a stretch, perhaps. Yeah,
yeah, slightly different price category.
Yeah,
and then the big category, the one that was the most hotly contested, and again could have been put down as a bit of a surprise, the best family EV, which we thought EV6, Ioniq 5.
Yeah,
Skoda Enyaq walked it.
It really did. People the jury loved it. And that was just to go back to that point you made earlier on about having the jury, myself and you, Paddy, we had zero input.
We did
on
not
their
vote.
votes.
Yes.
We had no votes. We had no input, no influence whatsoever. So it was.
We had our views, and we privately obviously would have had a notion what might win in various categories, but we didn't know for sure.
Yeah.
And Enyaq walked away with it.
It
really
did. I had the all-wheel drive variant there last week for a few days, but Paddy, you actually owned one at one stage.
Yeah,
So-
12 months and 30,000 kilometres in an Enyaq, and absolutely loved it. So, I mean, you could say, right, that's where I put my money. Put my money where my mouth is, and bought an Enyaq, and you know, I miss it, I regret it, but it was good to shift it on as well. Don't know what I'll get next now, mind you. That's a whole nother podcast, though.
I think it is. Yeah. Everything
Now, when we
exciting.
got into the luxury segment and the higher end segment, Mercedes EQS,
Yeah.
what a car.
Yeah. No, I haven't spent time in it yet, but I cannot wait to.
Yeah, me neither. But like, so we we really did have quite a variety of cars in the EV winners. But so look, again, going back to that choice and selection, there are so many cars now. I think it's because they were reminding me of Heinz. I think there's around 57 models of EV now, because it made me think of that thing on the label of Heinz, 57 varieties.
Yeah.
There's, if anyone says, oh, there's no EVs, there's no choice. Now, availability is a different
we'll
issue.
come on to that in a moment, maybe.
Yeah, but
it's amazing the selection, and I started writing about EVs, kind of 3-4 years ago, and it was a very short list. You compare the Nissan Leaf to, the Model 3 wasn't even announced back then, and whereas now the comparisons you can make are so much more details. You've crossovers, you've got a couple of estates in there now, and huge variety, which is great to see. Great to give people the options.
because we will be at the point reasonably soon where we stop talking about EV categories or EV specific awards. It's just they're going to be cars. So we are in that unique stage and phase. But look, we have to touch on it. The availability at the moment, it's not good, is it?
No, it's very bad. I mean, we've been speaking to some of the dealers, and at car launches we kind of ask people, what's the lead time on these now? I mean, you're stretching to a year in a lot of cases, and even beyond, which is just it's amazing.
And this is on the back of a situation where we know that used car values are higher than ever because there's not availability. You can't necessarily walk into a showroom and just drive out in a car anymore. So it's a strange situation for customers to be in, where they think, right, okay, I need to change my car. I'm sick of this one, but I'm a year away or 18 months away from the car I want being delivered. I think there's going to be a situation where people are getting cars to tide them over until the actual one they want arrives.
Absolutely, yeah. We were down at the MG4 launch there last week, and I was asking the MG guys, what if I walk into a dealer now, for an MG ZS EV, for example, when will I get one? And they said the dealers would probably advise you about 12 months.
You've mentioned the MG4, and it's a car that you've driven. I was away, but I walked through Drogheda Motor Show the other day, and there's Brian Reynolds Cars and Drogheda, who are our new MG dealer, and I saw it, and just listening to people talking, it's the car that everyone has a little bit of a buzz around. You did a video, it's on YouTube. Is it as good as we hear? Is the hype justified?
No, it's better.
Wow.
It's a generational leap from what they've done, and the big difference for people, and stop me, Paddy, if I get too nerdy on this one, but it's a dedicated EV platform. So this car was conceived as an electric vehicle straight up, and what it allows manufacturers to do is create something that you can call the skateboard platform. So it's just the battery down low, nothing else in the way, and then you build whatever car you want on top of that, and they're really made use of that. So the size of the the boot, the leg space in the back that you get for a car of that footprint.
So was it not the case with ZS and 5?
No, they were originally essentially just rebadged. There's a brand, the neighbourWe brand over in China. So these guys are owned by SAIC Motor, a major Chinese manufacturing giant. And so, I mean, some people use the term a compromise car, just because you got to stuff either a petrol or a diesel or a hybrid or an electric.
And you're fitting
into
bits
it.
wherever you can find a space, basically.
So you get into your Enyaq or a lot of EVs now, and it's just it's kind of a bit strange for people as well, because they get into the back seats and there's no transmission tunnel. It's just flat all the way across.
Yeah, that's flat pack.
Yeah.
So look, the thing about the MG4, everyone's going to want one. The price is right. It's, what is it starting off? It's like 28 grand or something.
Yeah, I think it's about 27 and a half, maybe delivery charges. But you're still under 30,000 euros, and you're getting a solid 300 kilometre range car that's 7.7 seconds.
Looks good, spec is good, space is good.
Yeah, and it's so much more refined compared to the MG5, the MGZS EV. You can just, I was thrown into a few corners just to kind of get a feel for it, and just so stable, it grips very well. It's impressive.
But look, anyone who's going to want one of those, is that a year as well? We don't know yet.
Don't know exactly, but the orders are already stretching out a long time because the demand is so high, and they're just not going to be able to fill it. I mean, it's the same with every manufacturer now. They just cannot get the batteries to put into these cars.
I think it's a car that, had it been launched in September, would have been knocking on the door for an AA overall title at our recent awards, right?
Yeah, because we've seen some of the jury members reviewing that car, getting into it, having a spin for it, and their enthusiasm for the car is really astounding.
Yeah, we know there's an Irish Car of the Year coming up in a few weeks, so maybe it might win that one instead. So you never know. Best of luck to MG if they do, because it is. Look, it's nice to see a car that is reasonably affordable. I know not everyone has 30 grand or has access to finance, but it's a night and day from where we were with EVs. It's accessible technology. It looks good. This is the sort of tech that will get more and more people into EVs, right?
Yeah. Just because it's at that price point, the MG5 will be in and around 35,000 euros starting off, and it's amazing what you get for that in terms of like adaptive cruise controls, and you'll probably get 400 kilometers range out of that car. It's fast enough, like it's only just over 8 seconds in the 0 to 100, so you're beating a lot of cars off the traffic lights with that.
What do you think is the main worry for people who are thinking of moving to EV? I mean, we know we do surveys and we do questionnaires and range and things like but if for the average person out there who's listening to this and thinking, is it for me? What do you think the main worries are?
What I hear the most is range. I don't know about you. What do you hear?
Yeah, range and residual values. Will the technology be obsolete? But yeah, it's fear based. It's will I break down if I get to a charging point? Will it be working? What happens if I'm stuck in the middle of the road in the middle of the night? They're the things that people say. And for you and I who've driven EVs at the start of the tech journey, yeah, it was in the back of your head, but it didn't really happen an awful lot. And it could be inconvenient, but we are getting better in terms of the tech, the cars, for sure, right?
Yeah. I mean, the range has come on so much. The chargers are actually very reliable when you look at the uptimes. It's a separate issue, will they be full when you arrive there? And we do need to have a shift. The one-off DC chargers here and there are great. They're a help. But I'd love to see more hubs. And when I say hubs, that's at least, 5, 6, 7 chargers there. So, if you pull up, even if they're all full, you're going to be on one of them in 5 or 10 minutes.
Would you advise, and I guess this is, if you're advising a relative or a close friend, would you advise someone who can't charge at home to buy an EV?
I wouldn't necessarily rule it out. Yeah. I have a close family member that doesn't have any sort of off-street parking, and they're an older generation than me, and they make it work. They do kind of 12 to 15,000 kilometers a year, so it's not major miles, but it's still significant.
So obviously it's better if you do, but you wouldn't say to anyone, oh look, forget it if you can't charge at home.
I wouldn't say that, no, because it might be someone's second car. That you might find that they'll get 3 weeks out of a full charge of that, and that's recouped in one charge at the office or 2 visits to the supermarket while they're picking up their shopping, So I wouldn't rule it out. Am I saying it's going to be easy for everybody? Absolutely not. And if you don't have a home charger, or if you don't have a dedicated charger in work, then I'll absolutely have a think about it. The worst thing that we could do is force people into EVs when it's really just not going to work in their life at all.
And there is a little bit of that going on. You see it on social media where, people are almost being shamed because they've haven't moved to EV, or they bought a new petrol Ford Fiesta or something. It's not going to be accessible to everyone yet, and I don't think we should be in a position where we start EV or ICE shaming someone, if that's a phrase.
Yeah, I don't like to see it. There's people out there, like if you put it this way, let's say, for example, we completely got rid of all types of range anxiety, all concerns, and everybody in Ireland goes, I'm going to swap to an EV tomorrow or next year. We won't even be close to having the supply of EVs. We can't switch everybody over anyway because they're just not there. And, so if we are going to switch people to EVs, what's the low-hanging fruit? What's the win here? For example, let's say you take your next door neighbour who just uses their car a little bit. They might do 4,000 kilometres a year. Then you've got a taxi person, taxi driver who lives in the next house down, and they do 40, 50, 60,000 kilometres a year. That's the much bigger win. If you want to reduce emissions, if we want people to be driving on clean electricity, that's where the win is. So let's focus on the low-hanging fruit.
And look, we often see as well on social media people, laughing and joking about the fact that we do so many EVs. But the fact is, there are other reasons apart from it being a desire. We're going to be forced out of ICE cars,
whether you like it or not. Yeah, it's only a few years away.
So I'm not sure where the end game is for some people, where they think, I won't drive one. But at some stage you probably will.
There's a lot of people that have taken a stance, possibly have never even driven one, possibly have been given the wrong information. I do speak to people who say, I'd never get an EV. Like, you can replace the battery after 3 years, which bears no resemblance to reality at all. They only go 100 kilometres. Well, no, this one over here will actually do way over 400 kilometres and possibly 600 or 700 kilometres. They're so slow. Everybody remembers the Father Ted episode and the milk float. You go, well, the fastest production cars in the world now, the Rimac Nevera, the Tesla Model S Plaid, not to 100 kilometre times in pretty much 2 seconds.
So to finish up, Blake, talk to me about some of your favourite EVs. You've driven lots of EVs recently. Give me a couple of the ones that really float your boat.
Well, one that has put a smile on my face the most. Would I actually buy it? No, because it wouldn't be big enough for my family, and the range isn't great. But the one that's put a smile on my face the most that I've ever driven is the Honda E.
Oh yeah, what a car!
Just, it's different.
I
Whether you like it or not.
That car.
Did you as well? Okay.
I loved it, and but no, I couldn't live with it. I'd love to be able to live with it, or if I had it as a second car.
Second car would be amazing.
But what a car. Fast, amazing handling.
Yeah, rear wheel drive.
One of the most interesting interiors I've ever seen in a car anywhere.
Plug socket inside it.
Yeah, so you can play your PlayStation or Xbox or whatever else. HDMI lead inside it.
Yeah, it doesn't have side mirrors. It's got 2 cameras, camera stocks.
Which you'd just love to replace after a few years, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's just brilliant. Put a smile on my face so much. Then, if I put my sensible hat on, one of the MG5s, one of the MGs, the MG4 is it's in the back of my mind, all right, just because the value for money for what you get. Do you know what I drove recently enough? The new Nero EV. I thought that was superb.
Yeah, I'm in that in a couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, like if I go back to and say what's amazing about it, I'm gonna go, I don't know. As an all rounder, it's just incredible. Like the feel of the interior was really good. It was very pleasant to drive. Road insulation was excellent. Really good range in it. Those things, I don't know. They just waved a magic wand.
Have it down for range. During the summer, I drove a Kona EV because I had never driven one.
Yeah.
And I could not believe how efficient that car was. Unbelievably efficient.
Yeah, there's people knocking close to 600 kilometres out of one of those.
But my one had the smaller battery, a range of 400 kilometres, and I was doing like 395 without absolutely trying at all. And it was amazing. I couldn't get over it.
Yeah. But not to mention the new Nero EV, that's got V2L functionality, which is just... It's a step for me, and we'll come back, we'll do another podcast on this in the future, but it's moving cars beyond being a box and 4 wheels into something else.
Yeah.
So you can draw power back out of the battery of these cars. And in our review, if you want to jump onto the YouTube channel and watch it, I actually boiled the kettle for a cup of tea sitting on the boot, and I had a power drill out and showed it working as well. It's incredible. Like, I could have powered my microwave 4 times over, just drawing energy back out. It's incredible.
And yeah, for me, obviously Enyaq was one of my favourites, but Polestar 2 I love. I know you're in it coming up.
2 weeks, yeah.
It's just not perfect, but for some reason it's just I love that car. I have a bit of a Volvo thing going on, but I love that car. But the i4 as well, that BMW. Wow.
I was just about to ask you. We filmed that just before the AA Car Awards, and we said that this is going to be a serious contender, and it was. It nearly won an award. It was very close.
Yeah, it was. Nearly won overall award actually.
Yeah, and that's funny, isn't it? The overall award, not just the EV categories, that it was knocking on the door for overall. Fantastic.
So look, we'll leave it there. As ever, if you have questions, if you need to know about EVs, just don't worry. Just talk to us, because that's what we're here for. We're here. Find us on the social media channels. If you can't find us on the social media channels, write us a letter. Whatever way you want to get in touch with us, just do, because that's what we're here for. We have endless patience in talking about cars, EVs, insurance, breakdown, whatever it is. But we've been talking about EVs today. If you want to get in touch, just reach out, ask the question, tell us what you want to see, and we will do that.
Just be prepared to have the ear bored off you, because we will talk back all day about it.
So that's it for this week. We will be back next week. As ever, if you want to follow us on all of our various social media channels, be it Facebook, Instagram, or even on TikTok now.
I know. I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, but we
previous generation. But
we are there. And of course, do subscribe to the AA Ireland podcast, and we will see you again next week.